Good afternoon. I want to talk about sugar today. So, sugar essentially is the plant's energy source, as well as yours and mine. I mean, you'll know what I'm talking about if you go on a carb-free or lower carb diet. But essentially, sugar the plant uses to power itself. It's essentially this plant's energy source. And of course, through the process of photosynthesis, that's how sugar is made. So, I mean, you could fertilize the heck out of these trees uh, through the application of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. However, those are just the building blocks. Those are the nutrients. Through the sunlight, through the process of photosynthesis, is how the plants grow and essentially produce foods for you. So what I just did right now is water and some molasses. Molasses is another form of sugar. So if you come here, lychee, okay, not lychee, longan. It is in direct sun, of course. It is photosynthesizing right now. Therefore, it is making sugar internally. At the same time, doing my foliar feeding schedule, which has molasses. In addition to feeding them, I'm also giving it some sugar, some energy source. This helps them a lot. So what happens is during the non-sunny days, sunny months, and also during the cold, freezing months, winter, these guys, the trees, the tropicals, being that they evolved to live in a climate where it is mostly tropical, as in there's never ever any freeze. These guys would prefer the climate to be more stable than what we've got. So what happens is these guys do need some help, and right around this time, right around the growing time, is when they would appreciate the help the most. Because what happens is right around the months of May towards November or so, these guys have no problem photosynthesizing the sunlight and then therefore turning the sun into sugar for the tree. So much so that almost always, depending on the tree in question, of course, they produce way more sugar than the tree can handle. So that being the case, the additional sugar, actually if you come here, the additional sugar, part of it goes to food production, mango, of course, flowering. And if you come here, actually, see all these longans being buzzed around by bees and flies, longans flowering. And of course, everyone's favorite, the loquat. So what happens is, because the tree's got so much stored up energy, sugar, in the form of sugar, some of it goes to food production. This is why it's sweet. Yeah. And also, for the in-ground trees, what happens too is underneath me, underneath where you and I are standing, there exists a marketplace via the mycorrhizal network. What happens is the trees, or right now around me, communicating with the mycorrhizal fungus underneath me in the ground. And what they're doing now is the tree, because it's got so much additional sugar, it actually trades with the fungus in such a way where the trees give the fungus sugar, which the fungus naturally cannot make themselves. And in return, the fungus gives the tree nutrients that the tree itself has a difficult time uptaking. It's a trade-off. It borders with the fungus, gives the fungus sugar. Fungus in return gives them nutrients that is difficult for the tree to obtain through the root system. And the fungus is most active when it's warm like this. Essentially the growing months. And in the Central Valley, that usually translates to between the months of May down towards, I say, around December or so. And so how hot are we talking about? What kind of temperature are we talking about? As of right now, it's 101 right now. This is actually pretty typical for even the tropical region. Granted, they've got way more humidity than we do, and it's like 31% humidity right now. But that's what happens. I mean, the trees, basically through the months of the growing months, has got so much energy, so much sugar through the process of photosynthesis that it gives it away to the fungus, which in turn encourages the fungus to grow more, and it's an ever evolving relationship. It's a lot like my solar panels. So essentially, when you compare the month of May to, say, January, the month of May and towards the month of December, I mean, my solar panels produces way more energy than my house uses. So the additional energy that's produced gets sent back to the grid. Now, for the 3 or 4 months in winter, it struggles to produce half of my household energy need. And in that case, I actually do get about half of my electricity from the grid. The exact same concept applies to trees, between the trees and the fungus. So if you could if you could encourage the growth of the mycorrhizal fungus by yearly applications of wood chip, I mean, yeah, it's like when you get a soil that is like so broken down like this is fungus breaking down the wood chip and turning the broken down wood chip into just nutritious recycled nutrients for the trees. Trees love that stuff. That's Mother Nature has a cool way of recycling itself. So if you could try to mimic that, as in try to encourage the growth of the microbes, excuse me, the microorganisms, the trees are gonna just thrive themselves. So that said, there are some things that you can do. If you come here, let me show you. There are some things that you can, well, actually, yeah. There are some things that you can do though. So citrus is a really good example. Majority of the time, I've seen this in citrus and mostly starfruit for whatever reason, and occasionally mangoes. But the foliage of the tropicals, they need to be in top shape. Just like my solar panels, I rely on the rain to essentially clean it up. It would help, yes, if I clean it up on a monthly basis, so that way it gets a maximum sunlight. Same principle applies to the leaves. If the leaves are healthy in the sense that they're not chlorotic or they're not lacking any deficient in any nutrients, these leaves are gonna at the same time are going to be able to absorb and convert the most sunlight, and therefore convert the most energy into sugar. So make sure that your trees are not deficient in anything, and it's just one of those things where you're just gonna kind of have to keep an eye on it. You're gonna have to just unfortunately know what's wrong with your trees. I mean, it's hard to give you a blanket point in saying this is how your tree should look, just because there's so many variables. But if you're able to make sure that your trees are healthy through the application of organic fertilizer, when you apply just general organic fertilizer, for the most part, your trees are going to be able to obtain all the nutrients that it will use, or it will need, that is. So, so that's energy production for you from the perspective of trees. So now, when you look at the new growth on the trees, I wanted to just kind of really point this out. Now, notice right around the growing season, if you've noticed the differences between these two mangoes, Pickering mango, Manila mango, okay? You don't see any new growth on the Pickering mango that is flowering. And the reason for that is as the tree flowers, and this really applies to practically about any tree, but as the tree is producing flower or producing fruit, that particular branch effectively stops growing. That's why you don't see any new growth on this Pickering mango. However, I bet you though, the second that I remove the flowers, the branches with the flowers removed, you'll see new growth coming out. So that being the case, when the trees are sending a lot of their energy to flower and fruit production, I don't want to encourage the tree to grow, as in I don't want to give it nitrogen. Usually right around this time, that's when I would stop applying nitrogen to the fertilizer to the tree that is either flowering or fruiting. However, for the trees that I see new growth in, like this right here, I can tell that he's probably not going to flower this year, which would mean I can give it all the fertilizer it can take, as well as it producing all the sunlight that it can produce. So that's one thing you can do. So anyhow, yeah, I just wanted to kind of really let you know. I mean, the whole process with photosynthesis, and if a tree is young, what I normally like to do in my case, especially for seedlings, is I like to give them a boost, help them out a lot, really by applying or giving them sugar. This really gives them the energy to grow nicely, and therefore make it through our winter as well as summer, because it also uses energy to, of course, try to cool itself. So, oh, and one last thing. This is kind of a bonus, which I know I've already shared with you. But so in addition to giving it the additional boost of sugar, molasses in this case, specific to trees that attract, that use flies and bees to pollinate the flowers, such as mangoes. Woo. When you apply molasses, sugar to the flowers, it attracts all sorts of pollinators. So that is a huge, huge benefit as well. So it's really a win-win, and this is really easy to do. So that's all. That's sugar for you. All right. Have a good afternoon.